These are the rules on the semicolon. There's only 4 of them. First is to use a semicolon between independent clauses that aren't joined by one of the fanboys words, for and nor, but, or, yet, so. So here's an example. Mrs. Campbell's baby likes to make funny faces, semicolon. She loves to stick out her tongue to make people laugh. So we have 2 independent clauses. I don't have a fanboys word here, but I want to connect the ideas because they're similar. So I put a semicolon there instead. And if you notice, the first word of the next independent clause is lowercase letter. Okay, rule 2 is to use a semicolon between independent clauses joined by parenthetical expressions. And these are some examples. However is the most common parenthetical expression, and I just wanted to show you how to use this in context. So love is generally shown through signs of affection. Semicolon, for instance, comma. When people cuddle, hug, or kiss, they're expressing love. So you always want to end your first independent clause with a semicolon afterwards. Then you provide your parenthetical expression, like however, and then you put a comma after it, and then continue with your second independent clause. Rule 3, you may need to use a semicolon to separate independent clauses joined by coordinating conjunctions when there are commas within the clauses. Okay, so if you have 2 commas, you don't need the semicolon, but more than 2 commas in one of the clauses, then you use a semicolon. And here's the rule in effect. So SJA, the Catholic school on Broussard Street, offers classes in English, math, and science. So that's one independent clause that has more than 2 commas in it. So even though I have a fanboys connector word here, I still had to put a semicolon there because there are too many commas within the clauses. So this is a second independent clause after it. Students found having fun on campus grounds are intelligent, considerate, and interesting. So all you need is more than 2 commas in a clause, and you have to use a semicolon here. Okay, rule 4, and don't freak out, that's only pudding in her mouth. Use a semicolon between items in a series if the items contain commas. So winners in the eating contest were Mary, comma, first place, semicolon. Susie, comma, second place, semicolon, and Ed, comma, third place. So those are my 3 items in a series, but the items themselves had commas in it, so I had to separate them with semicolons. Okay, moving on to the colon. Okay, rule 1 is to use a colon before a list of items, especially when you have expressions like as follows or the following. Okay, so here are 2 examples. So the girl was able to do it all, colon, sing, smile, wave, and water the ground. Okay, so basically you finish your sentence and you could put a colon there, and your list starts with a small letter. Okay, same thing here. When cleaning a wound, make sure you do the following. Okay, so the sentence is basically finished, but then you have your list that follows. Okay, be careful. If the list contains the direct object of the verb or the object of the preposition, don't use a colon. So if the sentence isn't finished yet, you can't put a colon there. So we collected. Okay, what is it that we collected? The blankets, canned goods, and clothing is a list, but it's also the direct object of the action verb collected. So it's part of the sentence. You cannot put a colon here. Same thing with this one. Dan has always been interested in, okay, yes, snakes, frogs, and lizards is a list, but the list is the object of the preposition in. So no colon is required there, and it is wrong if you put a colon there. Rule 2, use a colon before a long formal statement or a long quote over 4 typewritten lines. So this is something that you're going to use maybe sophomore, junior, or senior year in English. In freshman English, you shouldn't ever quote from a novel where the quote is over 4 typewritten lines, because you do have to set it up differently. And if you notice here, you don't actually have quotes around your quote, and you do put a colon before the quote, and you also indent differently. So that's called block formation. You'll learn that next year. Okay, rule 3, use a colon between independent clauses when the second clause explains or restates the idea in the first. Okay, here's my hubby back when he was hot. That boy is too stiff, colon, he refuses to show emotion or smile. So 2 sentences basically saying the same thing. I wanted to connect them because they're so closely related. I did put a colon here, okay, and I capitalized the H. Okay, I also could have put a period here, or I could have put a semicolon. If I put a semicolon, though, the H would not be capitalized. So this is basically all different variations. They're all correct, but just make sure you capitalize where needed. And in this case, after a colon, you do capitalize. Rule 4, okay, use a colon between the hour and the minute, writing the time, obviously. Rule 5, between chapter and verse, if you're quoting from the Bible. Rule 6, use a colon between volume and number, or volume and page number for magazines or newspapers. Okay, there's an example. And Rule 7, the colon after the salutation of a business letter. So if you're addressing somebody important, put a colon after their name. And that is it.